Good evening, everybody. Kevin here. Um, I know this is new, but you do get to see something a little different this time. My ears, huh? Take a look at those beauties. I guess I can look at the camera. I'm so used to looking at the screen, but I'm not watching a show right now. So, hello, hi. Sorry, my cat is wrestling with the haichu she somehow got a hold of right now, and it's very distracting. Well, tonight I was, this quiet Saturday night, I was trying to think about what movie I should watch next for when I can't sleep for insomnia cinema. And one of them on my short list is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which I've never seen. It's one of my dad's favorite movies. Joe's seen it, but I actually have never watched it. And like with all the movies, when I'm considering, watching it and what I could bring to it, if anything, I think about what I already know about the movie, and it's obviously very largely in the culture. But I was thinking about who's in it. It's starring, famously Clint Eastwood, of course, but also, Lee Van Cleef, who is, less of a household name, I think, than Clint Eastwood, certainly. And I was trying to think of other Lee Van Cleef movies I've seen, because I'm familiar with the guy. And, of course, Escape from New York came to mind. But then I had a recollection of a movie I saw as a little small child, an action movie he made, contemporary, so it wasn't a period piece like most of his westerns. And it was terrible. I had to look it up. I just had like fleeting memories of it, and I kind of did a deep dive. That was my evening. A movie called, I wrote Armed Response, which is such an 80s sounding action movie. And it was bad. I liked it enough as a kid, but I know it's a terrible movie. And so I started thinking about what were those other movies I saw as a kid, most of which I liked, but I know are bad movies. I know if I went back and watched them now, I would acknowledge the fact that my taste was terrible. We all have those movies. Maybe you've even gone back and tried to watch them, and it kind of wrecks your childhood a little bit. So I was going to kind of go back again. It's been a little time, like reminiscing, and I wrote down 6. It is by no means a comprehensive list. There are many, many horrible movies as a kid that I thought were amazing. And probably some good movies I watched with my parents that were really good, that I had no idea what was going on and thought were terrible, that were probably really great movies. But these are the bad ones. So I wanted to make a list and kind of go over those. And if any of these are movies that you really personally like, I apologize. I'm not trying to poo-poo anybody's nostalgia or childhood memories. Just know that if you went back and watched these movies now, you'd probably agree that they're not great cinema, regardless of the fact that they may hold a special place in your heart or have been entertaining. Certainly these, most of these, not all of them, I'll tell you which one didn't, entertain me as a kid. There's value in that, but we don't have to pretend they're good movies, right? The first one on my list, by the way, 4 of these movies are from 1986. That wasn't intentional. I feel like a lot of bad cinema was made in 1986. Most of them apparently are action movies, because I, as a little kid, loved every bad action movie I could get my hands on. It, not that I knew they were bad or not. But yeah, 4 of these from 86. It was apparently a rough year for some studios. I guess this was when all the cocaine was flowing through Hollywood and America. So yeah, and also 2 of them are Chuck Norris movies, also not intentional. And I didn't even include the Michigan action movies, which I've seen all 3 of. Guess Chuck Norris was kind of the go-to guy for bad 80s action movies. All right, let's get started, though. The first movie on my list, and I took notes, so I'll be looking down at my cheat sheet, is Iron Eagle from 1986. Directed by Sidney Furie, who also directed Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, so quite a pedigree there. By the way, when I was researching, I was basically looking up dates, studios, directors, cast. So the moments in the movie that I'm going to talk about, I probably will get some of it wrong. I'm going completely from childhood memory on that, and I know I've misremembered some stuff or forgotten some stuff, or maybe even invented some stuff. So if I sound like a complete idiot when I'm talking about clips from the movie, I'm going on what I remember when I was like 7 or 8 on some of these. So Iron Eagle from 1986, starring Louis Gossett Jr., and I had to look it up, Jason Jedrick, who apparently has gone on to have a pretty decent career as an actor and director. So no hate for Jason, but as a teenager in that movie, he was not great. I think he would probably acknowledge that. Sorry, Jason. I think his character's name was Doug. I could be wrong about that, but it doesn't matter. So at any rate, in this movie, as I remember from the plot, Doug's dad is like an Air Force pilot, and he sneaks Doug, the teenager, into the Air Force occasionally and takes him out and lets him fly fighter jets and is teaching him secretly to fly fighter jets without anybody knowing his teenage son is taking out fighter jets. You would think there'd be better security than that on airplanes, but apparently not, or fighter jets, but apparently not. At any rate, Doug's dad gets shot down. America's not going to help. He's in, it's the 80s, so it's I can't remember if they've said the country or not. Who cares? But it's a desert country, over there, as we, the capital O, capital T. And so Doug looks up one of his dad's buddies or something like that, another pilot, Louis Gossett Jr., and they get together, and the two of them, in two stolen fighter jets, attack a foreign country and force them to turn over Doug's dad. So it's a really plausible story, right? Very realistic. They attack and they, subdue the entire country in their two, F-16s or whatever. And the country agrees to give up Doug's dad, and they're able to land and rescue him and get away. So it's a fairly happy story. Of course, it doesn't help this movie came out basically at the same time as Top Gun. One of these movies is a hugely iconic, successful blockbuster film, and the other one is Iron Eagle. But you know what? Apparently it made money. Because when I looked it up, there are 4 Iron Eagle movies. I knew there were 2. I saw the first 2 as a little kid. Didn't know about the other 2. Apparently Louis Gossett Jr. shows up in all 4 of them. He's the only one. Spoiler alert, Jason isn't around terribly long to go through the subsequent films. I don't know what their plots are. It doesn't matter. But I will give Louis Gossett Jr. credit. It was clearly a paycheck move. He was a very established, talented actor at the time. But he went for it. There's a scene I remember where Doug and Louis Gossett Jr. they're in a bar or something, and they're looking at pictures, like black and white photos of pilots on the wall, and Jason, still inexperienced actors, like, I don't understand. How are these guys all different from me? Not great. And Lou responds with, because they're dead. All of them. Like, he's going for it, right? He earns that paycheck. He gives it his all, and good for him. I really respect the fact, the effort. If you ever want to see a movie where a good actor is really trying to elevate a bad movie and bad dialogue, watch Louis Gossett Jr. in Iron Eagle. It's kind of like Moira Rose, in The Crowaning, just really trying to make something out of what ultimately isn't great. So good for Lou. Ultimately not a great movie, and I can tell you right now, as I recall, the dialogue is very bad. The second movie on my list, from 1982, our first Chuck Norris movie, Silent Rage. I mentioned this one to Joe because it popped into my head for some reason when we were talking a while ago. Directed by Michael Miller, also has a pretty long, actually, directing career. In this one, Chuck Norris, again, going from memory on this point, plays a cop. He plays a cowboy hat-wearing sheriff, so he really stepped outside his comfort zone for this one. And anyway, he beats up bars, and he's a tough guy, and there's a lot of spinning lunge kicks and things like that because it's Chuck Norris. So a lot of kicking. But at any rate, there's a serial killer, like a brutal giant man who is a monster, and I think Chuck Norris fights him and kills him early in the movie. I can't remember specifically on that, but I'm pretty sure he does. So the guy's dead. Like, hey, the main villain is dead. Movie over. We're like, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes in maybe? Anyway, he goes off to the morgue. He's dead. But evil doctor at the morgue, now the plot of Frankenstein takes over, does some type of, I developed a serum or gene thing or whatever, and injects the guy, and basically he comes back to life and he's indestructible. Like, I remember a point where he's laying on the operating table and a doctor slices him open with his scalpel, and right then, in a cool, practical effect, like the wound just closes up and heals completely, because that's what you want to do. If you're trying to turn a person indestructible and invincible, is you definitely give it to a serial killer. Not a small child who dies in a tragic accident, but a serial killer. So, not to be too spoilery, but the serial killer gets up and starts killing people again. Only now he can't be stopped. Only Chuck Norris can stop him. And they fight, and again, a lot of spinning kicks, a lot of jump kicks, a lot of kicks to the head, a lot of kicks to the stomach. And I think as it ends, the big victory is Chuck Norris gets him, like, kick, his big slow motion kick gets him to fall down a well, and that's it. It's over. We've won. He's down we killed him in the well. And the movie's over. Chuck goes on. Life's over. And at the very end of the movie, they go down in the well camera, and they completely steal the ending of Friday the 13th. And the movie ends on a freeze frame of the guys jumping up out of the water. Pretty shameless there on its, let's say, homage. And that was one of the many, many times as a kid where I was like, well, because this was popular in the 80s, right? The bad guy's not dead. He's still moving. He still gets up. He's not laying there where he's supposed to be laying when it's over. And my thought on those always as a kid was, well, the movie's not over. It's not done. How are you rolling credits now? The movie's not over. And so that always annoyed me as a kid. I'm sure it was all like, tune in next time for, Silent Rage 2, The Cash Grab. But at any rate, there's a bad Chuck Norris movie for you. But if you like watching Chuck Norris kick a lot, that one's for you. The next Chuck Norris movie, also from 1986, The Delta Force. And I know there are a lot of people who really like this movie, but it's not a good movie. I didn't write down the director. It stars Chuck Norris. Basically, Arab terrorists hijack an airplane and make it fly somewhere, also in the sand, which is always in the 80s. And the Delta Force, the actual real commandos, but Chuck Norris is on a Delta Force team. And the team is led by a very haggard and old-looking Lee Marvin, who was at the end of his career and sadly at the end of his life, leads this Delta Force team to rescue all these hostages. I remember there's a big deal about some of them being Jewish. There's a big deal about some of them being American soldiers. One of the hostages is a priest played by George Kennedy, and I didn't know this until I looked it up. Liam Neeson is one of the Delta Force commandos in probably a very early role, maybe unrecognizable. Who knows? I certainly don't remember him. But if you want to know what kind of action movie we're talking about, Chuck Norris rides a motorcycle, like combat motorcycles, and dune buggies is what the Delta Force is using throughout the whole movie. There's a big action score playing all the way through. There's some tough guy one-liners. Chuck Norris uses an Uzi in combat the whole time, so it's pretty realistic. The bad guy, the main bad guy, the main terrorist, the Arab terrorist, whose name is Abdul, is played by a very white Robert Forster, who also, again, kind of like Louis Gossett Jr., gives his all in a really, really ill-advised performance in a movie. But it was everything I liked as a kid, right? There was a lot of shooting, right? Bad guys were very bad, good guys were very good, innocent people were very innocent, and all the bad guys got their comeuppance with one-liners. What wasn't to love? But it is not a very complex story at all. There's really not much to it other than bad guy gets shot, boom. And that was the 80s. The next one, this is a movie I don't have fond memories of, but I feel like it's worth mentioning. No, it's not Howard the Duck. We all know that was bad. No, this one is Soul Man, also from 1986, directed by Steve Miner, who I don't really know. This is the one, if you know, you know. This is the one where C. Thomas Howell is a rich, spoiled brat of a teenager. He gets into Harvard, but at that point his parents decide to cut him off, like, you're going to have to pay for Harvard yourself. And so rather than, I guess I can't remember what all he does to try to get the money, scholarships, loans, whatever. There were things. But I do know that the ultimate plan that him and his weird best friend come up with is there is a scholarship for black students in LA where he lives. And he applies for that scholarship. And when he goes in for his interviews, he does it in full blackface with the wig and everything. O.C. Thomas. And he ends up getting the scholarship, getting into Harvard, and he goes to Harvard completely in blackface. Like, that's the bit for the whole movie. And I recall that there are an awful lot of stereotype jokes, right? Any black stereotype you've ever heard throughout your entire life, whatever it is, it was made fun of in that movie. I don't know if they were trying to be progressive, but it obviously, with C. Thomas Howell in blackface and all of this happening, it came across as incredibly cringe. Now, as a small kid, I didn't get the racism of it. It was a little over my head. I didn't know the implications of blackface at the time. I didn't understand some of the jokes they were making. I've seen clips since then that's like, but I still was uncomfortable with the movie. It wasn't because I was like so forward thinking. It's because I thought it was really wrong that he was lying and basically stealing a scholarship to get to go to college while other kids in the movie were clearly struggling to do the same thing. I didn't think that was okay. And that's why I thought the movie was wrong. I thought it was kind of gross. As a little kid, I'm like, this guy's kind of stealing. Now you watch it and there's like a whole there are things way worse going on in this movie than that. I was working with a guy a couple of years ago. I live in the Midwest, and he was very much an older Midwestern guy, older than me. And he was like, you know what movie you never see on TV anymore? Soul Man. I was like, oh yeah, that's probably a really good reason why, TBS and TNT aren't still showing reruns of Soul Man. Somehow they got Ray Don Chong and James Earl Jones into the movie. I get it. Maybe Ray Don was still on the come up, and she didn't really have the luxury of turning down roles because it was a pretty big role for her in the movie. But come on, man, James Earl Jones, you didn't need to do that. The climax at the end, he gets caught, of course, and they're sitting around. He's talking to James Earl Jones, and he's apologizing, and James Earl Jones is like, sounds rough. Sounds like now you know what it's like to be a black person. It's just like, I just want to crawl inside the couch. Oh, my God, that movie's a bad idea. I don't know how nobody's career ended over it. I guess we all just shrugged it off and said, the 80s, there was cocaine. The fifth movie on my list is one I liked and nobody else seemed to at the time. It was a movie called City Heat from 1984, directed by Richard Benjamin. It had everything to be a good movie, you would think. It starred Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds in the 80s as Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds, and kind of like a period noir buddy cop comedy kind of thing. Again, I'm going completely from memory here. They somehow got Madeline Kahn and Rip Torn in the movie. I mean, everything sounds like this should have worked. It was clearly big budget, but it's bad. It was supposed to be a funny noir, right? Which I think can be pulled off, but they didn't. I think the idea was, we got Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds. Let's let them play Clint Eastwood and Burt Reynolds, right? So for the movie, Burt Reynolds has like all the silly, zany one-liners all the way through the movie. He's the funny, charming guy, and Clint Eastwood has the one-liners too, but they're the tough guy, 80s action one-liners, and he's the one shooting and punching everybody. So each of them kind of got to do their thing, but it was supposed to be comedic, and it really missed the mark. I remember after we watched it saying out loud to my family, like, I kind of like that, and my older stepbrother threatening to fight me because he was so mad that I said I liked it, because he clearly hated the movie. And in this case, he turned out to be right. Generally, his taste is very bad, but he kind of nailed it on this one. I don't remember much. I remember an early scene in the movie where Eastwood and Reynolds, they're not really friends or anything, but they happen to be at the same diner, and Eastwood's drinking coffee, and two heavies come in and they start beating up Burt Reynolds, and Eastwood won't get up and help him, and he's like, wait, give me a hand. He's like, go away, drinking his coffee. And the ha-ha funny moment is one of the guys bumps Eastwood and he spills his coffee, and he gets that angry Eastwood look on his face, and he gets up and beats the two guys up, not to help out Burt Reynolds, but because they spilled his coffee. And this is supposed to be funny. Another point that really stands out in the film is towards the end, during the big I think it's towards in the big final climactic whatever. There's a shootout happening, and Reynolds pulls out his gun, and it's a large gun, and he kind of smiles over at Eastwood like, look how big my gun is. And Eastwood looks back even more smugly and pulls out his revolver, and it's got like a 2-foot barrel on it. Ha ha, in the look of, my revolver's way bigger than your gun. Ha ha ha. Get it? Subtle. My gun's bigger than your gun. And again, this was supposed to be like a crowd-pleasing, rousing moment in the movie. Like, we're all supposed to laugh at this. So it was I don't know if it made money or not, but obviously, when people think of great Clint Eastwood movies or Burt Reynolds movies, nobody mentions City Heat. So obviously didn't go great. And then the last movie is the one I mentioned before, Armed Response, the Lee Van Cleef movie. Again, I looked up, the IMDb around it. David Carradine is in it as well, and I think he plays Lee Van Cleef's son. I don't think that their age was that different, really. And, of course, Michael Berryman. Do you guys remember Michael Berryman? Kind of a weird-looking, bald guy, kind of a strange face. I'm not being mean. That's the point of him being in the movie. He was in The Hills Have Eyes, which I saw as a little kid. His face sticks in your memory. He was a biker in Weird Science. Anyway, the reason I mention him is because he is featured very prominently on the poster, right? His head is the poster. So you think he's like the big guy in the movie, but he's barely in the movie at all. He's just like one of the heavies for the bad guys. And I could be wrong about this, but I think the bad guys were like 2 warring Asian gangs, and somehow one of Lee Van Cleef has a couple of sons. One of them gets killed by one of these gangs, so the rest of it's a revenge thriller. I think another son gets killed during the revenge part, and so by the end it's just Lee Van Cleef and David Carradine. It's a lot of shooting. Again, it's not very deep. Good guys are good guys. Bad guys are bad guys. There's torture. There's bad one-liners. I remember a moment where I can't remember which heavy it was, but you think he's dead, and he's an 80s movie, so he gets up and he shoots Lee Van Cleef before getting shot, again, dead himself. And it's like, oh no, Lee Van Cleef's dead. And he stands up. He's like, I'm all right. Bulletproof vest. And everybody laughs. Like literally, it's a funny scene. He gets up and he says, I'm okay. Bulletproof vest. And everybody guffaws. And I know how bad that scene was because my dad, who paid for the movie, was sitting behind me on the couch. And I was sitting there watching it, and I heard him go, oh, Jesus Christ. And I'm like, this might be a bad movie based on that reaction from my father right there, that guffaw. Turns out he was right. Again, that's 6 movies that I came up with. Now on that last one, Lee Van Cleef, unlike Lou Gossett Jr. in Iron Eagle, Lee Van Cleef completely phoned in Armed Response, and I don't know that I can really blame him. Again, towards the end of his life, just like Lee Marvin in the Delta Force, there to keep acting, keep working, get a paycheck. But he, unlike Louis Gossett Jr., he did not care at all about the movie he was in. He just did it. He said his lines, but yeah, it was a terrible, terrible movie. As are all of these. If I'm being honest, 5 of the 6, Soul Man's the only one as a little kid I didn't like because I thought the premise was kind of evil. I didn't realize how mean-spirited the movie was, but it did bother me. The racism going way over my head. But the others I actually liked. If I watched them now, I would be able to acknowledge better how terrible they are. I should probably go back and watch the trailers, and I'd probably get a sense of that. But at any rate, what are yours? I know all of you have DVDs. We're all different ages, of course. DVDs or streaming movies or VHS or movie theater or television. What are the bad movies you loved as a kid that you kind of avoid now because you know it would just ruin your childhood for you? What are the movies you actually went back and watched and you're like, oh my God, I used to love this and this is really bad? I'm not going to lie. Lethal Weapon is one of those movies for me. I thought Lethal Weapon was way cooler, and I'm like, this is kind of corny. But what are yours? Do tell. And again, if you love any of these movies and think I'm way off base for criticizing them, I apologize. But hey, thanks for being here and listening to me on that. One more shot at my ears. Have a good night, guys.